Hey, Facebook family, welcome to Sergeant Dorsey Speaks live at 5 on the West Coast, 5 p.m., East Coast, 8 p.m. You know what? I forgot a critical part of my whole situation here. So because we're all family, you guys, I'm going to include you in this last little step that I forgot to do. Oh, I tickle myself, but I couldn't come on here without a little shine, right? I hope I hope you guys don't mind, but we're family, right? So it's okay if I put a little gloss on while you guys are in the room watching. It's okay, right? Listen, welcome. Sergeant Dorsey live at 5 on Facebook. Hello to my YouTube subbies. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Love you guys. Appreciate you bunches. I need you as you come into the room to share this broadcast on your timeline and let your friends see what we're talking about today. Come on, you guys, go ahead and do that because y'all share every other manner of foolishness. You share every other stupid thing that goes on. So the very least you could do is, share a little wisdom that I'll be spitting today with your friends on Facebook. So welcome. I want to remind my first-timers that I want to welcome my first-timers and remind the rest of you, I have a podcast, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks, drops every Tuesday, generally around 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific. And in case you missed it, check it out. Subscribe, like, so you'll get notified when a new podcast drops and you don't miss a thing because I was kind of on one this week because, I'm right off the heels of attending the summit at the Men's Empowerment Summit at Cal State University, Dominguez Hills. I'll talk to you a little bit about that. I think I mentioned some of that in my podcast, but let me follow my notes and let me say, for those of you that are first timers, so you know who I am. I'm a retired LAPD sergeant, 20-year veteran in patrol. Having spent all that time in patrol, I come to you guys weekly just to kind of talk to you about what's going on nationally, what's making headline news, give you my perspective based on my 20 years of lived experience in a uniform on a major metropolitan police department like the LAPD about what's occurring, why I think it might have occurred, and more importantly, what do we do to make sure that we're in a good place if we find ourselves in the midst of a police encounter, because at the end of the day, you guys, the goal is for everybody to go home safely. And so I'll talk to you about what I think will keep you safe. I make no guarantees. And listen, I know that, folks comply because people get bothered when I say you need to comply. But I also know what happens when folks don't comply. And so while it's just a suggestion, remember that all of what I say does not require your agreement. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I'm just telling you what I think might be helpful. And listen, if what I say to you doesn't resonate and it doesn't make sense because you know your rights, proceed, Governor. In the voice of my president, number 44, proceed, Governor. So that's who I am. Not afraid to pull the covers back and expose police culture, talk to you about police training, police policy, and sometimes I rant a little bit, just a little bit, about police code talk and double speak. And so I did some of that on last Saturday at Cal State Dominguez. This was the first time, you guys, I ever had a speaking event where there were hecklers. There were actually hecklers in the crowd. And so I was on the stage with a colleague and they had a lot to heckle about. And, one of them even tried to come for us, me. You know what happens when you spark my competitive edge. I am the wrong one. And so I'll share a little bit about that whole situation because the person who came for us, me, allegedly was an LAPD officer. Now, I don't know this person, but I do remember him because he reached out to me very early on when I first wrote my book, Black and Blue, The Creation of a Manifesto. This person had reached out to me on social media and he wanted me to get involved in whatever shenanigans he had going on. And, you know, I do my best work alone, so I wasn't really hearing any of that, right? And so fast forward 5 years later, this guy shows up at this event. Hey, Randy, glad you made it, sir. Appreciate you. Hey, Lisa. This guy shows up at Cal State Dominguez University and reminds me, you know, that we had some conversations years ago. And I said, oh, yeah, I remember exactly who you were, because I'd never forget a wingnut, right? And so, yeah, so anyway, he sat down and in the midst of this whole thing, you know, he did what a lot of folks like to do, which is question why the both of us that were on the panel didn't say anything about, you know, what was going on when we were on the job. Why did we wait till we retired to have something to say? And so, you know, I wish you trolls would do your homework before you come for me. It'll save you some time and anguish, I think. But nonetheless, here's the answer to that question, Mr. Troll, because he may very well stick his head in here and check out this podcast. I don't think we're friends on Facebook anymore, but this is a public situation. And so he'll have an opportunity, if he so desires, to check it out. And sir, I didn't just retire. I've been retired. And for those of you who have been following my trajectory, you understand I've been getting the city of Los Angeles every month for a few years now. And so let me just say how and why I do what I do. In 2013, Christopher Dorner, a Black LAPD officer, went on a killing spree. And all of my colleagues who I communicate with, we all knew that Christopher Dorner was going to get executed like he did because he did a terrible thing. And so let me say this, I don't condone murder. Christopher Dorner felt grieved by the Los Angeles Police Department, and he struck out in the only way that made sense to him in that moment, which I don't agree with, and that was to kill folks. And so while Christopher Dorner was, you know, doing what he was doing, and while they were looking for him, I realized, you know what, I have a story to tell, because everything Christopher Dorner said, I knew to be true. I knew his manifesto was legit, because even though I hadn't met him and I had not been on the department when he was on the department, but I absolutely knew everything he talked about I had been through. I had been the victim of, I have been subjected to every kind of ism while I was on the LAPD: sexism, racism, in some instances, reverse racism. And I'm talking about, you know, by people who look like me, you know, because all skin folk ain't kinfolk. And so while they were hunting for Christopher Dorner, I said, you know what, I'm gonna just write about what the department did to me, because I knew they would kill him. And I knew the department would say what they said about him. He was crazy, don't believe him, he's a malcontent, he's disgruntled, whatever, whatever. So I said, I'm going to write this book about my experiences. I'm going to name names because that's what I do. So people couldn't say, did that really happen? Is that even true? You know it happened. You know it's true, because you can Google the person who I named, or you can Google the incident, because I like to use, you know, cute little names that I give people, like, you know, little Tink Tink and Granny, and, you know, the Christian family who follows me know what I'm talking about, right? So that's what I did in my book. So people couldn't say, is this true? Yeah, it's true. And I wrote my book while they were looking for Christopher Dorner. And I was able to actually finish writing my book in 8 days, because I was just writing about what I had gone through and what my life experiences were. I didn't have any notes, and I had never planned on writing a book. I was just pissed off in a real way. And it was very cathartic for me to get some stuff off my chest, if you will, about what the LAPD had done to me. And so I wrote the book. And then when I wrote the book, I was like, okay, so now what? Because I really didn't know what the next step was, but I knew I needed to publish it. And I did. That was in 2013. And it wasn't until the following year, in 2014, in July, when Eric Garner was choked to death by NYPD 2 weeks later, Mike Brown was shot and killed in Ferguson. Then a couple of weeks after that, here in Los Angeles, Ezell Ford was shot by LAPD. And so I had already been kind of trying to figure out what to do with my book and how to let people know that I was there and that I exist. And I decided that because I had some opportunities, I was invited to go on the Dr. Phil show and talk about some things, because people were starting to know there's a person out there who's a police officer who speaks different from what we're used to hearing. And so it just kind of morphed, not anything that I planned, that I set out to do. It just kind of morphed into me talking my truth about police use of force, why those first 2 or 3, Garner, Mike Brown, Ezell Ford here in LA, should not have happened. And then, you know, after that, it just went crazy, seemingly. Tamir Rice, John Crawford, shot and killed in Walmart, and a host of others, folks that were beaten up like William Dent in Michigan, Sam DuBose, Walter Scott shot and killed, Sandra Bland, and everything else that happened after that. So I was just really wanting to speak about use of force, why I didn't think it was necessary, why Eric Garner shouldn't have been choked to death, why Mike Brown should not have been shot 6 times by Darren Wilson, and everything else that happened based on my trained experience. And that's how it started. And so I just started giving people the words, which is what I really wanted to do. I even met with Tritobia Ford, the mother of Ezell Ford. I went to Ezell Ford's funeral, something I had never done before, and wasn't really sure how his mom, how that family would feel about me, a police officer, showing up at her son's funeral. But I just felt compelled to show up and hand her something that would maybe bring her some comfort and some insight and educate her on what she needed to say when she was confronting then Police Chief Charlie Beck about why LAPD said that her son did something that was suspicious, that made those officers think that what they did was justified in taking his life. And so that's how this thing got started. I just wanted to say out loud, like I do to you guys every week, what it is that you should say if you get a chance to talk to a police chief, ask them a question about what's going on in your community, tell them what it is that you want. And when you hear code speak and double talk, because I've shared with you some examples of it, you'll know it, and you'll counter it with a follow-up question that'll hold their feet to the fire. So Mr. Troll, Mr. Heckler, that's why, that's how I do what I do, sir. And so, like I said, I didn't just retire. None of this stuff was going on until 2014. Hey, John, none of this stuff was going on until 2014. And so, you know, there was nothing for me to say on a public level, if you will. And besides that, I thought, you know, who cares about what I went through? I had no desire to write a book. I had been approached by someone some years earlier. Actually, she was a doctor who was treating my mom. And when she found out that I was a police officer, she's like, oh my God, you should write a book. And I was like, who cares? Write a book? Why? Who cares? And it was several years later that I decided to, in fact, write a book. And then, of course, here we are. And so I keep morphing. I keep becoming something else. I didn't start off wanting to be I don't call myself an activist, but I do believe I'm an advocate for families. I stand in the gap and I give you the words, and I call a spade when I see it. And, you know, if the police did a thing and they did it right, then I say that too. So I don't really have a side. I'm on the side of truth. I'm on the side of transparency, and I'm on the side of accountability. So Mr. Troll, Mr. Heckler, that's who I am, sir. But anyway, yeah, so that was fun. It was a good time Saturday, and met some really great folks. Had a chance to put my book in the hands of a couple of people, and so that always makes me happy. For those of you who would like to have your very own personal copy, you can visit my website, www.sgtcheryldorsey.com. And you can purchase a copy there. I'll send you a signed copy, or you can go to Amazon if you just want a garden variety copy of my book, and you see it in the background, black and blue, The Creation of a Social Advocate. Now, The Creation of a Social Advocate is volume 2. Volume 1, The Creation of a Manifesto, is out there and it exists, and you can find it on Amazon, but you can't purchase it. And the reason that you can't purchase volume 1 is because I did a lot of cussing. There was a whole lot of profanity in The Creation of a Manifesto, because remember, I was hot and there was stuff that I just needed to say, and I was venting and I was ranting and I was striking out at all the folks that, you know, I wanted to holler at in a way that I, you know, thought might, you know, stick a finger in their eye, right? Because I could. And so I also then, you know, met a very amazing man who became my business manager and created a whole situation for me and told me that if I want to be able to talk to the babies and, you know, Mother Jones at a church, I need to take some of the profanity out. So I came out with a revised version last year. And in addition to coming out with the second edition, volume 2, Creation of a Social Advocate, I decided to add several new chapters. So you don't miss anything if you don't get The Creation of a Manifesto, because The Creation of a Social Advocate includes all of the chapters from volume 1, but I cleaned it up. You get the PG version, no profanity, so the babies can read it. And then I added everything that happened starting in 2014, after I published my first book, The Creation of a Manifesto. I talked about all those shootings, all of the uses of force that wound up in a death. I talked about families who I have come to know and collaborate with and fellowship with, if you will, since I wrote my book. I talk about the kinds of things that I think we should be doing so that we're safe, the kinds of things that we should be saying to our children, the talk, right, that we have, the one that every, you know, Black parent has to have. I talk about that in my book. I talk about the things that I share with my own sons, because I'm not just, you know, telling you one thing and doing something else. And so for those of you who want to check it out, you can read the very first chapter. It's entitled You've Been Warned. And you can read the very first chapter. And if you want to get the book, go to my website, www.sgtcheryldorsey.com, or visit Amazon and get Black and Blue, The Creation of a Social Advocate. And I also want to say to you guys who don't know, because I've had a lot of people ask me about this, and so because I'm not real tech savvy, you know, I don't dye my hair gray. I am actually gray. So I'm not from this world of social media. I'm still trying to figure it out and fine tune it, but I'm stepping into the 21st century even a little further. And I have a Cash app, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks. So some of you have found it. Some of you have been supporting Sergeant Dorsey Speaks podcast, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks Facebook Live. I appreciate you. I thank you in advance. And for anyone else who wants to support me like you did Popeyes with that chicken sandwich. Yeah, if you just want to give me the cost of a chicken sandwich on my Cash App, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks, that would be amazing. I granted, you know, I'm not going to fill you up with, you know, stuff I can't pronounce. I'm not going to raise your blood pressure, but I will give you some information that might be helpful. So Sergeant Dorsey Speaks is my Cash App for anybody that wants to support me. Thank you. Hey, Joseph. What's up? Let's see who's here. Hey, Debbie Taylor, sister girl. Thank you, Debbie, for doing what you do, girl. I appreciate your steadfastness. I appreciate your support. And yeah, thank you, Debbie. I appreciate you. So, okay, let's see what else. Podcast told you dropped Tuesday, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks. Make sure you get notifications so that you sign up, like it, heart it, whatever it is you do on your on your podcast platform so that you'll get notifications. I'm on iHeart. I'm on iTunes. I'm on Spreaker, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn. I think I need to sit still, you guys. I'm getting all beside myself because I'm noticing that I seem to be freezing as I move around. So let me not be so animated. But yeah, like, heart it, whatever you do, so that you'll get notifications when my podcast drops. And also, about the troll heckler, Mr. Heckler, sir, listen, family, I don't mind a spirited debate. I really don't even mind you guys asking me some questions, but I do, get offended when you want to argue with me about, what it is I know. And I just have a real hard time. I'll engage you a little bit, but I have a real hard time going back and forth with anybody who hasn't made it to the finish line. And you guys understand what I mean about the finish line, right? And evidently, Mr. Heckler, who wanted me to know that he was an LAPD officer because he stood up and proudly said that his serial number, began with a 2-3. And so I had to let him know that mine began with a 2-2. Now, to the civilians, that doesn't mean anything, but to my LAPD family, and there's probably some newbies on here, and I remember when I came on, they used to tease me and the old timers because they had serial numbers that started with a 1-2 or 1-0, and mine was a 2-2 something something something. And they used to say, "What is that? Your serial number, social security number?" Because they wanted to act like my serial number was so high they couldn't even fathom a number that high. And I don't know now if they're still in 6-digit serial numbers. Or what is it, 5-digit? I was a 5-digit, 2-2. I don't know if they're still in 5-digit or if they're in 6-digit now, but I am a OG, right? 22607 is my serial number. And so, yeah, when 2-3 stood up and tried to let me have it, I did what I do best, which was handed him his ass. So please, people, understand, don't come for me unless I send for you. I'm just saying. Also this week, been a busy week. I had an opportunity to spend some time with my sister, Sister Charlene Mohammed of the Liberated Sisters radio show. Hope you guys got a chance to check it out. I shared the link on my timeline. And also there's an amazing article that Sister Charlene wrote in the final call. And I will include the link to that as well so that you can check that out. Now, as I'm talking to you, if things go crazy, just let me know, because you guys know I have AT&T, and I've said before, AT&T is the devil. So I'm hoping that my internet connection remains strong. I'm hardwired. I used to be doing it on Wi-Fi, and I had a situation this morning with AT&T. I'm digressing, but work with me. Something happened with my doggone main DVR box, and I got up this morning and the doggone thing wasn't working. Luckily, I have more than one, but this was my main DVR box, and I lost all of my recordings. And so right now, if I saw anybody from AT&T, I would probably sock them in the throat. Because every time I'm on TV, on CNN, or lately I've done a lot on HLN TV, and I was recording it all so that, because sometimes they don't give me the clip right away when I'm on. And so I record it, and then I record from my TV with my phone so I can upload it to YouTube so that I can share with you whatever it is that I said. And I lost all of my recordings. And so I am hot about that. And tomorrow I'm going to raise holy hell with whoever answers the phone in customer support once I get this new DVR that they're going to deliver to me tomorrow. But I am not happy. I am not happy with AT&T. And if I could switch, I would absolutely. But these cable networks and Dish and Direct and Uverse, they all seem to have a monopoly on areas, and sometimes you can't get only but one depending on where you live. And so right now, I seem to be forced to have to deal with AT&T. So if at any point during this broadcast, things, just lock all the way up, it's not me, it's the devil. Okay. So also going on right now, one of the things that I talked about with Sister Charlene, even though this happened about a year ago, but some of you may not know. So I'll give you a little update on the young lady in McKinney, Texas. Remember that pool party that they had a while ago, year or two ago, and there was a 14, 15-year-old girl who a police officer by the name of Eric Casebolt was chasing the kids like a crazy man with his gun out, shooing them away. And he wound up, knocking this little girl to the ground, straddled her, and there was a lawsuit. And so the lawsuit settled, and this young girl and her family, I think they got, from what I heard from Sister Charlene, I think the family received $148,850 exactly is what the little girl received. And there were 6 others who also were involved in litigation, and the other 6 people there, I'm assuming young people, they received $6,000 apiece. Now listen, for a 15-year-old girl, I'm sure her eyes probably got all big and wide when she, heard she was getting $148,850. But to fully grown, fully developed people, you understand that ain't no money, because once the attorney got whatever her cut was, and if there was lawyer fees included, and taxes, I don't know, this little girl could have wound up with $15,000. I don't know. I'm hoping that she was able to get enough to at least she won't be able to get a mansion and a yacht, but maybe at least pay for a year of college. So that's what happened in that lawsuit. And listen, Eric Casebolt, he was free to roam about the cabin. Don't know where he is. He was able to resign. He apologized for his role in that whole situation, and how he tried to explain it away was that he had earlier in the day responded to 2 suicide calls, and somehow he was all bent out of shape and all emotional and not in a good headspace, and that's why he was running around like a crazy ass, pointing his gun at everybody, and then jumped on that baby. So I guess that story sounded reasonable, because remember what I tell you guys all the time, great deference is given to what a police officer will say. And so because of that, there was a grand jury that was paneled over in Collin County in Texas, and they decided not to indict Eric Casebolt in that incident. So where is he now? Who knows? He might be on a police department near you, because listen, McKinney, Texas was the 3rd police department that he had been on. Before that, Eric Casebolt was a Texas State Ranger. Before that, he was a police officer for Oklahoma City. And I say all the time, police officers don't move around like NBA players unless there's a problem. Unless he was asked to go, given the gift of resignation on those other 2 before he got to McKinney. And again, from McKinney, he was allowed to resign. He was not fired. So there's no record, as far as I see, of his foolishness. And, if somebody were to ask him, well, why'd you leave McKinney? He could just say, whatever he wants to say about why he left, and have that not be true. And I'll tell you how I know that to be a fact. Because my good buddy over at the Los Angeles Unified School District, Frank Kabibi, when he was shown the door because of the shenanigans and the foolishness that he allowed to go on under him and through him as the Deputy Inspector General at LAUSD, because he is the subject of civil litigation, me, and because he is the subject of complaints of sexual harassment by 2 other white women at LAUSD after he discriminated, harassed, retaliated against, and made sure that I got fired. He lived to offend again. And then finally, when he did something to 2 good white women, they said, okay, sir, so this is a bridge too far. And they gave him the gift of resignation. And I know this to be true because we deposed him. And when we deposed him under oath, my attorney asked him, "Why did you leave the school district, sir?" And he says, "Oh, I just got tired of the politics. I just didn't like what was going on." Now, see, had the school district fired him, he wouldn't have been able to tell that lie under oath during a deposition. But nonetheless, that's what he said. And I knew that that wasn't the truth because I had already gotten through the FOIA the information on these two white females in my office that he had sexually harassed. And I knew about their complaint, and I knew about what he did, and I knew what they said he did. And I knew it was because of that that he was shown the door. So my point is, when you're given the gift of resignation, whether you're a deputy inspector general at the Los Angeles Unified School District or a police officer like Eric Casebolt, when you're seeking other employment, you can just give them whatever reason you want for having resigned. Much different than if you're fired, there's a clear record of why you were fired. And so Eric Casebolt, he lives to offend again. And like my buddy, Frank Kabibi, he lives to sexually harass, discriminate against, and then retaliate against folks if they complain. He lives to offend again. And, he might offend again. I'll just say this, because he did get another job, you guys. Frank, I know all about it. You were working at Amtrak. And listen, he went from a deputy inspector general being asked to resign to be a senior investigator over at Amtrak. Now, why would he go from being a deputy inspector general to a senior investigator, but for he's a crazy ass? So I just wondered, did he tell Amtrak the truth when they hired him? Because he was given the gift of resignation. He didn't get fired. He resigned in lieu of termination. And so he could have told them anything. And you know what? I think he probably did tell them anything. And that's why they hired him. Not asking the question that I'm putting out there right now, which is, "Sir, you were a deputy inspector general. Why do you want to be a senior investigator at Amtrak?" Yeah, I don't think they asked him that question. But you know who did? Me. I asked that question of an attorney over in, I don't know what it's called. Oh, let's see. I have her card right here. Let's see. She is in quality assurance and audits. Quality assurance and internal affairs. Yeah. I asked her about that because I was just curious to know if, Amtrak did their due diligence and whether or not they knew that, Frank Kabibi was a habitual abuser. And if they didn't ask him before they hired him as a senior investigator, at some point, I think they pulled him to the side to have a fireside chat with him because a little bird told me that he no longer works for Amtrak. So, squeaky wheel gets the oil, you guys. I don't just, tell you, a thing to do. And, I don't just, put stuff out there. I tell you what to do because I've done it. And I always say, you've heard me, fuck with the bull, you get the horn. And so a couple of weeks ago, Frank Kabibi got the proverbial Amtrak horn. So, yeah, don't mess with folks if you don't want to be messed with back. That's that. Now, breaking news. I've been looking all day trying to see if there was anything about it beyond the fact that the fugitive couple has been captured. They were captured on yesterday. There was supposed to be a press conference today, but because I was wondering, and I was going to talk about this anyway until some family sent me a message. And so thank you for letting me know that this couple had been apprehended. I received an email from some Facebook family regarding this couple. Remember, it was several weeks ago, Blaine Barksdale and his wife, I think her name is Elaine, they had escaped on their way to, in the midst of some kind of transport, remember? And I was making a big deal about this because both of them are in their 50s and they look like they're all to the curb. And I was wondering, how could they overcome two guards? And there was a third person in this transport van. And evidently these two old curmudgeons were able to tie all three of them up and escape and get in a red truck or something. I don't know how they found the truck, but nonetheless, after several days, weeks of being on the lam, the U.S. Marshal on Monday, they had increased the reward. It was 10,000, then they made it 5,000, then they went up to 25,000. And once they got up to 25,000, either somebody, gave them up, because they needed, some new shoes, or it was a coincidence. But on Wednesday, they were captured. And they were supposed to have a press conference today. Now, they're not saying a whole lot about how they were captured. The details are real sketchy. But anyway, they're in custody. Now, back to this whole gift of resignation. There's a police officer over in Glendale, Arizona, who was allowed to resign. His name is Joshua Carroll. And evidently, he resigned before they could fire him because there is due process and there's some steps that any department has to go through before they actually fire you. And evidently before they could, ring that bell, he resigned. He put in his paperwork. There was an internal investigation regarding improper use of force. And what Joshua Carroll finally did to get fired is he beat a gentleman who has some challenges, some mental challenges. His name is David Delaney. And there's a video out there of this officer stopping Delaney in his car, and he ultimately asked Delaney to get out of the car. And you can tell that something is not quite right with this guy, David Delaney. He talks in a way that lets you know he's not quite right. His movements were kind of off, if you will, and his responses were not what you would expect of somebody who was not having some issues. And so this officer, Joshua Carroll, he winds up hitting this guy, David, in the head several times with his taser. Now, what he didn't know, Joshua, and he didn't even, take the time to think maybe this guy is not resisting. Maybe he's not being non-compliant. It's just that he has an issue. David, about 18 years ago, suffered a head injury when he fell off of a ladder. And so while he drives and is able to move around, he does have some limitations. And so that's what he was experiencing when he encountered Joshua Carroll back on June 13th. And then Joshua Carroll not only hit him several times, but tased him as well. And Joshua Carroll, the former officer from Glendale, Arizona Police Department, said the reason that he was beating this man repeatedly over the head with the taser, I guess once he shot out all of his taser cartridges, he just started using it like a damn claw hammer. And he's hitting this man in the head. Joshua Carroll says because David kept resisting, and because David was resisting, it scared Joshua. And he tried to use that as the justification for this unnecessary use of force. And so thankfully, finally, command staff over there on the Glendale Police Department said enough is enough. Now listen, Joshua Carroll had been involved in 5 previous disciplinary actions. So where there's smoke, there's fire. I always say there's red flags. Every time something happens with regards to a use of force, whether it's just excessive force or deadly force, I always say that there are probably things in the officer's personnel package that would let you know he's a fool, that the police department probably knew that, and they've been cuddling him and sheltering him and protecting him until they can't. So now David Delaney gets tased, gets abused, and they can no longer shelter this guy. So there's a commander over there who wrote a memo to the assistant police chief. And what the commander said is that Officer Carroll has a pattern of discipline involving poor decision making. So they know that he's a fool. There's a pattern. And I don't know, thankfully, they didn't wait till somebody died at his hands, but they did wait until this young man, Mr. Delaney, was, severely battered at the very least. The commander said that he no longer has any confidence in Carroll's ability during routine contacts and stressful situations. He went on to say that Carroll has demonstrated an inability to maintain composure and appropriate officer presence and to respond appropriately to the situations when he's faced. These poor decisions have occurred while he is on and off duty, and that Carroll has violated multiple policies. So for that, and because they believe that this Joshua Carroll is a risk to the community, he puts the community at risk, that they were going to terminate him. So Carroll hit the eject button and resigned. The things that Joshua Carroll had been involved in, just to give you an idea of just how stupid he was, evidently there was some kind of pursuit. He had a trainee with him, and he told his trainee to drive in excess of 100 miles and run red lights, and the trainee did it. What? Where is that trainee? Is he still on the job? Because somebody needs to pull him to the side and take his temperature and make sure he doesn't have a fever. There is no way in hell you could get me to drive my car 100 miles an hour in a pursuit through a red light. But anyway, that was one of the things that Joshua Carroll did. And in the midst of this 100-mile-per-hour pursuit through red lights, Carroll is firing off rounds from a doggone rifle. Now, it doesn't say that anyone was injured, and I'm assuming he didn't hit anyone when he's firing off these rounds because he was only given a written reprimand. So he lived to offend again. Why would he do anything different? They don't seem to care if he's a wingnut. He was involved in a traffic collision. They gave him what they call a memo of correction. He was at fault. Don't know what was involved in the traffic collision. And then last year, 2018, he was given what they call a letter of counsel. So I don't know if this is progressive discipline. You know, first he got a memo of correction, a letter of counsel. He got a written reprimand for some improper post on Facebook. And then another memo of correction because he applied for some kind of promotional situation on the job and misrepresented his resume. He lied, in other words. He lied on his resume during a promotion process. And he received a memo of correction for 3 AVLs. I don't know what an AVL is, but it's an acronym for Automated Vehicle Locator. I don't know what that means, but in 2016, he did that 3 times. So they just gave this guy enough room to hang himself, and, you know, he did. Thankfully, he's gone, and no one had to lose a life, but poor little David Delaney did get lumped up. And because he resigned, Joshua Carroll could be coming to a police department near you. In other news, over in Florida, remember the name Michael Dunn? Michael Dunn is the white guy who got all hot and bothered in the gas station in Florida, over in Jacksonville, Florida, because Jordan Davis, 17 years at the time, pulled in with some friends and the music was too loud. And so Michael Dunn decided that it was his job to deal with them, wound up shooting and killing, murdering Jordan Davis, was put on trial and found guilty. Well, in his arrogance, because he's never shown any remorse for having shot and killed Jordan Davis, he was so full of himself, so sure of himself. You know, white privilege will do that, right? Florida, stand your ground. But they convicted him, and he has appealed several times that conviction. He appealed back in 2016 and was denied. And so again, he just recently appealed the conviction. He was charged with first-degree murder and other charges for that 2012 incident. And this time, again, the state appeals court has rejected his appeal. It says a 3-judge panel on the First District Court turned down 11 arguments that were raised by Michael Dunn, including one of Michael Dunn's arguments trying to get his conviction overturned is that he had ineffective assistance of counsel. In other words, his attorneys didn't do a good job. And the 3-panel judge said, FOH. Yeah, bye-bye. So I'm sure he'll appeal again. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know who's paying for all these appeals. I don't know if he's doing it pro per. In other words, if he's representing himself or what. But oof, just imagine, folks who go through this, lose a loved one, whether it's by police or it's a Michael Dunn or it's a Zimmerman, whatever his name is. And you just have them constantly just poking and sticking their finger in your wound, and it can never really quite heal. That hole can never heal because, first of all, you've lost a loved one. And secondly, the arrogance of the person that took your loved one's life has the nerve to be bothered, be put off because someone would think to punish them. Anyway, that just happened. And so I hope we've heard the last of Michael Dunn. I want to talk a little bit about some police discipline going on over in New Jersey. And I want to compare and contrast that with what happened a few weeks ago in New York. I talked a lot about NYPD and how they, I think slapped on the hand those involved in the choking death of Eric Garner. First, Pantaleo was allowed to sit on the desk and make good money. And then, they fired him because he lied, and the Police Independent Civilian Review Board got wind of it. So Commissioner James O'Neill couldn't not let him continue to stay on the job because, shoot, civilians know now he lied. So they had to let him go. And then compound that with the fact that Kizzy Adonis, the sergeant who had been charged with failure to supervise, that was what they charged her with, failure to supervise, because she didn't intervene. She didn't stop that deadly chokehold, that prohibited chokehold that was being used in her presence. And because of that, remember, she relinquished 20 vacation days. So compare and contrast that. A man lost his life. This heifer gives up 20 vacation days. Over in New Jersey, Long Beach Township Police Department, to be exact, there's a sergeant over there by the name of Gerald Traynor, 53 years old. And back in April, he was charged with accessing individuals' personal information from a law enforcement database. Oh, police, they are the gift that keep on giving. So this sergeant was using the database to get somebody's information. And there's been examples of other officers who've done that very same thing. I remember reporting and sharing with you, there was a sergeant, I believe in Florida, who was, using the police database as a dating site, get women's addresses and show up at the house. He got fired. This sergeant over in New Jersey, same thing. They fired him. And they criminally charged him because it is a federal offense, I believe, when you access department records, information, databases to get folks information. So they criminally charged him, and he pled guilty and was sentenced to 1 year of supervised probation in addition to losing his job. And so I say that to say, contrast and compare. Here's a guy who goes in a database, gets folks information, and he gets criminally charged, loses his job, and is put on probation for a year. Contrast that with a man loses his life, choked to death with a prohibited chokehold, and everybody kind of gets a little tap on the hand over in New York. NYPD, boy, they are a strange group. There is right now a female sergeant. Be interested to see what happens with this. She was off duty in Macy's over in Yonkers. Her name is Eva Pena, 37 years old. And she was off duty over there shoplifting. Evidently, Miss Eva saw 6 garments in the Macy's department store she couldn't live without. So I don't know where she was shoving them. But anyway, a female security guard caught her and stopped her, and they arrested her. So now Eva Pena, she's been suspended. Unlike Daniel Pantaleo, that ass won't get to sit on a desk somewhere and collect $93,000 a year. No, Eva Pena has been suspended from her beat. Evidently, she used to patrol over at the Housing Authority in the Bronx. So she won't be doing that anymore. She's assigned to home. And so we know that, evidently, if you steal clothes from Macy's, It's a bigger deal over there to the NYPD than if you take someone's life. And we know this to be true. You don't have to take my word for it, because Lieutenant Christopher Bannon, he sent that text to one of the officers who had notified him of the death of Eric Garner. Lieutenant Christopher Bannon sent him a message and said, quote, "No big deal," when they notified him that Eric Garner was DOA. Lieutenant Christopher Bannon said, "No big deal. But if you go in Macy's and steal 6 garments, you got some splaining to do." So I'm going to just take a quick intermission, if you will, because I have someone asking me a question. So, Michael, you're asking me about PTSD in cops, and is this likely being actively monitored? I would say no. But I can't tell you that definitively, because first of all, there are 18,000 police departments across this nation. And so I cannot speak for 18,000 police departments in terms of what they do. But what I tell you, what I think is that, like anything else in terms of police officer misconduct and misbehavior, I think a lot of times the reason that officers are cutting up in the field is because they're dealing with something. And let's face it, it's not sexy to self-report if you're having issues, if you're a police officer. And I've talked a little bit about this on my platform. I talk a lot about this when I'm speaking, and what it is that I think departments should think about doing to better look out for their employees, because in corporate America, they have employee assistance programs that will help their employees on a litany of issues if they are able to express it and not be ridiculed, not be judged, if they aren't concerned about losing their ability to be employed. So, you know, I know that you heard someone say some stuff that sounded kind of gnarly. And listen, I'm not making excuses for people for what those officers were saying. I don't know if it was, you know, gallows humor, right? Black humor. Because police officers, you know, are exposed to some gnarly stuff. And, you know, we're all a little twisted, me included. And we have a strange way of dealing with stuff sometimes. And sometimes, you know, it could be that an officer says something inappropriate or what seems inappropriate or off-colored or insensitive. And sometimes, Michael, it could just be a coping mechanism. So I don't know how to speak directly to what it is that you heard. Certainly, I don't know what their intent, what they meant by that comment. But police officers don't self-report, and that's why you hear so much about suicide rate in police departments. And you know what? Maybe truthfully, you don't hear a lot about the suicide rates because it's not something that police departments talk about, because that too is not sexy. And you know, I talked about that in my book, because I worked with someone who committed suicide, and I talk about him in my book. His name is Fred Nichols. He was my sergeant, and I refer to Fred Nichols as Christopher Dorner before Christopher Dorner. If any of you want to know the story of Fred Nichols, you can hear a little bit about it in my book, or you can Google him. But I mentioned Fred Nichols in my book on purpose because I wanted to have his name out there. People don't talk about officers who get pushed to the brink, if you will, and how officers respond. And part of why I wrote The Creation of a Manifesto is because I really wanted police officers who felt similarly situated to Christopher Dorner, who felt like they weren't supported, or who felt like there's no life after LAPD. I wanted people to understand, absolutely, there's life after LAPD. I've been living that life for years, and I didn't want anyone else to do what Christopher Dorner did, which is go out and take a life because you are grieved, because you felt you were done slimy. that was one of the reasons why I wrote the creation of a manifesto. And I mentioned Fred Nichols specifically because I know as I'm saying his name today, there are a lot of people who don't know who he was. And, you know, while he was my supervisor, you know, he was a friend and he looked like me, and LAPD did him dirty. And, you know, when he was funeralized, they didn't even want us to go in uniform because that's how LAPD gets down. And so I thought it was important for me to memorialize him and to mention him in my book and mention how he got to that place that he got to years before Christopher Dorner. And people continue to struggle with issues. So, Michael, I hope that kind of answers your question. If any of you know someone who's struggling, who's having issues, I know you don't want to report them to their department because then you run the risk of them losing their job. But take them somewhere to get some help, right? That's what that's what a good partner does. That's what family does. If you know somebody is struggling, before they act out and do something that's going to either hurt themselves or someone else, take them to go get some help. That's why I say that police officers should be reevaluated regularly because somebody needs to crack that head open and just look in and make sure everything is working right. And when it's not, get them help. There seems to be some new phenomena that's going on, and it's probably not really new. Matter of fact, I know it's not new because I talk about this in my book too, because I work with some characters who were involved in some ridiculous sexual deviant kind of stuff. But I've read very recently about a lot of police officers being involved in rapes. Now, we know about the 2 NYPD detectives who were involved in a rape of a young woman, and they were just given probation, right? We talked about that last week. Well, there's a Chattanooga police officer, former Chattanooga police officer, who was on duty, and this is a brother man. His name is Desmond Logan, 33, and Officer Logan has admitted to raping 3 women who were in his custody. Now, he was charged and has reached a plea agreement back on the 4th of September over in federal court. He's also admitted to using a stun gun on a woman to keep her from leaving the car, probably in the midst of this rape while he's on duty. He also pled guilty to 2 counts of deprivation of rights. And so each of these counts carries 10 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. He has not been sentenced. He just entered a plea. I'll try to follow up and let you know what kind of sentence he gets because after all, he looks like me. So, they may just go ahead and get him, right? You know what I'm talking about. He's also going to have to register as a sex offender, and he too resigned before they could fire him. So it don't matter if he resigned because he won't be getting on another police department. That ass is going to jail. He'll be making big rocks into little rocks. I just don't know for how long. And then over in Texas, there was a Texas Ranger investigation of a Marlin, Texas police chief. Now, this police chief, his name is Nathan Sodek, and he was charged with, or he was being investigated for sexual assault. He too was having sex with an alleged victim in a city park over there back in April and May, and having sex with her in his police car. Now, she was somebody who was, troubled and having some issues with criminality, and I think her license had been suspended. There was something going on with her that made her feel like she needed to submit to these sexual encounters, if you will, because he's a cop, he's a sergeant. And so he took advantage of her and abused his authority. So they finally figured it out, and they were on to him, and they were going to go they were serving a warrant. They were about to arrest him when he ran back in the house and grabbed his gun and ate it. So that's that. But, there's a lot of sexual abuse, sexual assault stuff that we're hearing about with police officers. And, we're just hearing about it now, But listen, like I said, this is nothing new. I talk about it in my book, Black and Blue, Creation of a Social Advocate. I worked with a supervisor when I was in CTD, Central Traffic Division. I can't say his name, but if you do the math and figure out the time of year, you might understand who I'm talking about. He was involved in some shenanigans. There was another officer when I was working CTD who, same thing, on duty. He was going up in Elysian Park, and they had a little name for what he was doing, and I can't say his real name either. But if you were in CTD, during that time in the, what would that be, the late 80s, if you were in CTD, you remember, I'll just say Johnson was his last name. And I even had a sergeant to let you know how high up foolishness can be known. And, back then it was very different, right? They, sexual abuse, off color comments were routinely made in roll call. And roll call is run by a lieutenant or a sergeant too. And so, as a female looking like I look, I'm sitting up in roll call and they just cutting up and saying all kind of crazy stuff. And you just sit there and you just listen to it because ain't nowhere to go and complain. Wasn't no Me Too back then. You just sit there and those men say it. And, if you feel some kind of way about it, if you do say something to a supervisor, they'll tell you to suck it up. FOH. Suck it up. And so this officer was, doing stupid stuff. And even after we all knew, nobody came to the troops and said, hey, one of our own, did some stupid stuff and, just make sure everybody else is in a good place. They created a little name, and this sergeant even had a little dance that he did. And it was called the Johnson Shuffle. Johnson wasn't the officer's name, but I'm going to just say that. So it was the Johnson Shuffle. And my sergeant would he was a character. He would come into roll call, or you'd see him walking down the hall on the first floor, which is where CTD Watch Commander office was. And he would do the Johnson Shuffle, which was kind of something like this, where he's, doing his hands, because Johnson got caught with his hands inside the car of a citizen in Elysian Park. And his woman was in the back of the car, and Johnson was doing this. Yeah. And my sergeant thought that was funny. So he created a dance. And all the other men thought it was funny too, because they used to yuck it up about it. And, they would do the dance down the hallway. That's how stupid and twisted police are. That's the culture. And so when folks want to know, why things are the way they are and why don't people complain, because it's condoned. It's thought to be funny. It's made fun of. It's the stuff of jokes and lore. And so, yeah, you better get with it or get over it. But you certainly don't go tell, because there's a price to pay. And so, I talked, about a lot of stuff, but I had to pick and choose my battles. And so that's why I was able to make it to the finish line, Mr. Heckler, and you didn't, sir. Now, for a bit of politics, because I know that the debate is on, if it hasn't already started, I don't want to keep you guys too late. I bet a lot of you probably want to check it out. But let me just say this about Sister Girl Kamala, because I don't know how she's going to do tonight, and she's kind of fallen in terms of her percentages, but I'm troubled by her. But be clear, I'm an anybody but girl. Be clear. I don't think Kamala is going to get the be the Democratic nominee. But right now, she's coming out with something that she's calling her blueprint overhaul for the criminal justice system. And to me, this just sounds like more mumbo jumbo. So I'm going to just read it to you real quick. Her blueprint overhaul for the criminal justice system includes ending federal mandatory minimum sentences, pushing states to do the same. She wants to terminate the death penalty and solitary confinement and phase out for-profit prisons and cash bail. She also speaks about creating a situation where the federal government would subsidize departments, incentivize departments who are looking to get engaged in this rehaul of the criminal justice system. But listen, you know, as I read that, I don't hear anything about accountability for police use of deadly force. I don't see how any of that changes that, stops it, gives an officer pause. So while all that sounds good, yeah, you're going to end solitary confinement, you're going to terminate the death penalty, you're going to end federal mandatory minimum sentences. But what about folks getting killed? What are we doing about that, Kamala? So if you guys ever show up at a town hall and Sister Girl's there, ask her, please, what is she going to do about these fatal police shootings and deadly uses of force, excessive uses of force? As one of her talking points, she points to her re-entry program when she was an AG here in California. And she talks about collecting and publishing data regarding in-custody deaths and police shootings when she was an AG. Again, you know, she mandated that officers have body-worn cameras when she was here as an AG. But what she don't talk about is the fact that she refused to get behind anything that had anything to do with legalizing marijuana and ballot initiatives aimed at lowering scores for nonviolent offenses from felonies to misdemeanors and giving certain nonviolent felons a chance at early parole. Yeah, she wasn't feeling any of that. And I don't really know what she has to say today about that. But nonetheless, while she was against all that back then, she has reversed her stance. And she did that just earlier this year. Wonder why. So I don't know. I don't know about Miss Kamala. She says now that she would push to get more money to the U.S. Department of Justice to incentivize state agencies to conduct independent investigations of officer-involved shootings. Okay, so she's going to give them money, maybe, depending on who's running DOJ, because we know there's a fool at the head of the DOJ right now. So, but let's say that there's not a fool, that we're able to flip the House and the Senate, and you know, we'll have a Democratic president, whoever that might be. If they were able to incentivize state agencies to conduct independent investigations of officer-involved shootings, then what? I mean, conduct an investigation, okay, you're gonna suggest that they have an investigation. You don't make it mandatory. You're just gonna suggest it. And then after the investigation, then what? Because listen, they're always having investigations and blue panel ribbons and surveys and doing research, and nothing has changed. So I don't know how that helps us, but nonetheless, that's what she's proposing. And she also wants to create a national standard, which sounds a lot like AB 392 here in California, that establishes officers can only use deadly force when necessary. So, yeah, sounds like doublespeak, sounds like code talk, and but I'm an anybody but girl. So listen, whoever is the nominee for the Democratic Party, people, please, please, please vote, vote, vote. Do not cut your nose to spite your face. I pray to my God, and please you do the same, that Ruth Bader Ginsburg remains strong and healthy until we get someone else in the White House, and preferably a Democrat, because if Lil Tink Tink or one of his minion, one of his cohorts gets to put another lifetime appointment on the state Supreme Court, ooh, wee, is all I can say. Right now this week, I shared this with you on Facebook, there is a confirmation hearing going on right now for, I think this guy is like leader of the Wingnuts. I can't say his name, but he is looking to be sworn in, to be confirmed in a lifetime appointment on some judicial situation. And even the Republicans, even Lindsey Graham got in his ass yesterday during the confirmation hearing, because this guy, he believes in some kind of, something called some kind of something that has to do with homogenized. It's got a weird ass name, but basically the bottom line is this world needs to be all white is the bottom line. If the world was all white, things would be better. And he is a lawyer right now in the White House, and soon could be in a lifetime position if he's appointed. They just brought him up for confirmation very quickly a couple of days ago, and then within 48 hours or so after they named him to be confirmed, they said, okay, we're having a hearing. Tink Tink decided to have this hearing, push it through along with his minion, while everybody else was worried about, you know, him firing Bolton, or, you know, him wanting to make vapor cigarettes illegal. Yeah. Please stay focused. Please stay focused, and vote, vote, vote. So on that note, family, I'm going to let you guys get to the debates because I want to check it out too. And I'm just going to say one more thing about Lil Tink Tink, because listen, you know, I think he didn't pick the wrong fight with Bolton. Now that he has fired him and they've been having this Twitter war, Tink Tink says he was fired. Bolton says he resigned. Tink Tink's calling him a loser and a coward and everything else that he does, you know, when he ain't in your presence. And so Bolton just clapped back and said, I will have my say in due time. And so pundits have been, you know, trying to decipher that code talk. And they believe that next year, around September or so, Bolton is going to come out with the mother of all tell-alls, because he was right there at the right hand of the devil. And he has a lot that he has seen and heard, and there's a lot that he's going to say in due time. And I am here for it. So come on with it, Bolton. Come on with it. And September would be a great time to launch that Scud missile just before the election. So, family, thank you, thank you, thank you. For those of you, again, who are... Olivia, you're asking me about the name of that guy. Oh, you're going to make me go and look. His name is something Banish. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Banishi. It's something really weird. I was trying to see if I could find it, and I can't. But if I can, when I'm done, once I'm done here, Olivia, I'll get his name and I'll put a link. Maybe. I hate to do any advertisement for the crazy people. Y'all Google it, you'll find out who he is. But it's a lifetime appointment, and he looks to be relatively young, you know, like 40-ish. And so, 20 years in this particular assignment is nothing. I'm sure he could last. So thank you for hanging out with me. Hope you enjoyed the show. Support me. Sergeant Dorsey Speaks is my Cash App. YouTube subbies, like and tell a friend to come on over to YouTube and check us out every Thursday and see what it is that I have to say here on Facebook that I ultimately share with you. For those of you who've been following, I am now kind of semi-regular on the Law and Crime Network. I have been appearing on the Morning Docket, as well as another one of their shows later in the evening, where we look at real-time court cases that are going on, and we just kind of chop it up and talk about the trial, the testimony. It's usually myself and an attorney who speaks from the attorney perspective. I speak from the law enforcement perspective with regards to these ongoing trials. And so some of them have been really, really good and really interesting. I shared with you just a couple of days ago a trial that's going on right now. 18-year-old girl, 2 days after the prom, gave birth, and they're trying to decide now, was the baby born alive or was it a stillbirth? She says it was stillbirth, and she buried the baby in the backyard and kind of tried to cremate it. So, yeah, I don't know. But anyway, good stuff. I'm a fan of Court TV from back in the day. For those of you who remember, I think that's how Nancy Grace got her beginning on Court TV before she launched off and became this other, thing that she is, thing that she does. And so I really do enjoy watching these real-time court trials. Law and Crime Network. Check it out. Check it out. See you guys next Thursday. Have a good week. Until then, you know what's up. Be good and be safe.